Federalist Paper 73, Part 3. As you can see, I'm showing you the different editions of the Federalist Papers, and I encourage you to, if possible for you, to read the introduction by these different scholars who have edited these papers, their footnotes, and just benefit from those. I know in the near future, all different, the introduction to different editions of the Federalist Papers will be available to you online. It might cost you a little bit, but it's definitely going to happen. Paragraph 9 of Federalist 73, it may perhaps be said that the power of preventing bad laws include that of preventing good ones, and may be used to the one purpose as well as the other. But this objection will have little weight with those who can properly estimate the mischiefs of that inconstancy and mutability in the laws. Remember, every time you hear the word mutability, mutable, Publius doesn't like it, because he'd seen what had happened in different states, and the laws being changed every 6 months, every year, and he said this is catastrophe because people will not know what kind of government they're dealing with, what kind of policies this government is going to have. Is it going to be stable, constant? So that's why mischiefs of that inconstancy and mutability in the laws, which form the greatest blemish in the character and genius of our government. See? They will consider every institution calculated to restrain the excess of lawmaking and to keep things in the same state in which they may happen to be at a given period, as much more likely to do good than harm, because it is favorable to greater stability in the system of legislation. Remember, when they defined or they said what the Republican government is going to bring you, it's going to bring you stability. This word energy and stability constantly comes up. And then Madison, on the other side of the scale, says liberty, defending your liberties. But granted, we have to have stability and energy. Stability in the system and energy for the government to get its job done. And it ends the paragraph with, the injury which may possibly be done by defeating a few good laws will be amply compensated by the advantage of preventing a number of bad ones. So he says, yes, we know sometimes this veto power might create a headache, but in the long run, it's preferable to have it and not take any chances of letting the legislature do whatever it wants to. The next paragraph, nor is this all. The superior weight and influence of the legislative body in a free government and the hazard to the executive in a trial of strength with that body afford a satisfactory security that the negative would generally be employed with great caution, and that there would oftener be room for a charge of timidity than of rashness in the exercise of it. A king of Great Britain, with all his train of sovereign attributes, and with all the influence he draws from 1,000 sources, would at this day hesitate to put a negative upon the joint resolutions of the two Houses of Parliament. He would not fail to exert the utmost resources of that influence to strangle a measure disagreeable to him in its progress to the throne, to avoid being reduced to the dilemma of permitting it to take effect or of risking the displeasure of the nation by an opposition to the sense of the legislative body. Nor is it probable that he would ultimately venture to exert his prerogative, but in a case of manifest propriety or extreme necessity. All well-informed men in that kingdom will accede to the justness of this remark, a very considerable period has elapsed since the negative of the crown has been exercised. If a magistrate so powerful and so well fortified as a British monarch would have scruples about the exercise of the power under consideration, how much greater caution may be reasonably expected in the President of the United States, clothed for the short period of 4 years with the executive authority of a government wholly and purely Republican. So he says, look at Great Britain. The king there dares not use his veto power. In fact, he hasn't used it, or she hasn't used it in a long, long time. It only is there just to, as a final remedy if there's going to be a disastrous policy going into effect. So he says, if the King of Great Britain will not and cannot use this veto power that much, then we, in a Republican form of government, in a system where the president is going to be serving only for 4 years if he's not reelected, then you don't have to worry about him abusing that power. He'll know when to do it when it's to the best, for the best. It's to the advantage of the American people as a whole. I read that. It is evident that there would be greater danger of his not using his power when necessary than of his using it too often or too much. An argument indeed against its expediency has been drawn from this very source. It has been represented on this account as a power odious in appearance, useless in practice. But it will not follow that because it might be rarely exercised, it would never be exercised. In the case for which it is chiefly designed, that of an immediate attack upon the constitutional rights of the executive, or a case in which the public good was evidently and palpably sacrificed, a man of tolerable firmness would avail himself of his constitutional means of defense and would listen to the admonitions of duty and responsibility. In the former supposition, his fortitude would be stimulated by his immediate interest in the power of his office, in the latter by the probability of the sanction of his constituents, who, though they would naturally incline to the legislative body in a doubtful case, would hardly suffer their partiality to delude them in a very plain case. I speak now with an eye to a magistrate possessing only a common share of firmness. There are men who under any circumstances will have the courage to do their duty at every hazard. So this is just a safeguard. We have to put it there because we don't know who is going to be elected to the House of Representatives, to the Senate, who is going to be in the legislature. Just like we have given the power for the House and Senate to remove the president if he does something that is dangerous for this country, and there are lots of other powers in the legislative branch. Now we've given this veto power to the president just so that when there are cases where emotions and passions run high, just because 51% of people say you got to do something, doesn't mean it's right. So the president will be able to block measures that would be, in the long run, disadvantageous to the well-being of this country. In the next part, this will be the fourth time we'll come across a name of one of the anti-federalists that actually Hamilton names by his actual name. So I think there's just a little bit left, 3 more paragraphs, and we'll just get to them in the next video.